that our service members follow lawful orders and lawful orders only. Is that right? Do you agree with the statement, quote, "The military won't follow unlawful orders"?
I do.
Mr. Hegseth, do you agree with that statement?
I do, but understand what you're insinuating at a partisan point.
I'm not. I'm actually quoting you directly, Mr. Hegseth, from April 12th, 2016. And I appreciate that on the record, you've clarified this important.
That is the echo of a brilliant trap closing, when a Secretary of Defense becomes so guarded that he brands his literal own words as a partisan smear. You realize you're watching a masterclass in demanding accountability from the elite. Welcome to the ultimate guide on how to dismantle a cabinet official with hard evidence. Let's dial it back and watch how Representative Maggie Goodlander laid this unavoidable snare.
Chair, I recognize the gentlelady from New Hampshire, Ms. Goodlander.
I want to thank our witnesses for being here today, and I want to begin by getting right to it, since my time is limited, on this $1.5 trillion budget request. Mr. Hegseth, you testified last year and you testified again today that you will be accountable for every American taxpayer dollar that comes to the department, where it goes and why. That's really important since, as it's been pointed out, the department has failed 8 audits. The department remains on GAO's high-risk list. The Inspector General just last year alone identified billions of dollars that could have been put to better use, and in questioned costs, that is spending that raised red flags. So this is a crisis right now in accountability of where the dollars of the American taxpayers who are in the middle of a cost crisis, where this money is going.
Congresswoman Maggie Goodlander just brought heavy artillery to a political skirmish. Right out of the gate, she establishes the stakes, an eye-watering $1.5 trillion funding demand from an agency that has flunked 8 straight audits. We are talking about a department sitting squarely on the Government Accountability Office's high-risk registry, an entity where the Inspector General flags billions in questionable expenditures. This isn't just a routine oversight hearing. It's a blistering cross-examination of Defense Chief Pete Hegseth, who swore to be fully transparent, yet manages a fiscal black hole while everyday Americans are suffocating under a cost-of-living crisis. And as you're about to see, when Goodlander pulls out the hard numbers, the Pentagon's sole defense is evasion. Stay until the end, because the moment Goodlander reveals her final card is a flawless lesson in making the powerful eat their own words. Hit subscribe, because when the military treats your tax dollars like a bottomless ATM, you need to see the receipts.
I want to ask about your war in Iran. And Mr. Hurst, you testified earlier today that $25 billion has been spent to date. I just want to clarify that that is money, that taxpayer dollars that have been spent already in this war.
$25 reflects the costs of the war, right? So we've already spent the dollars on munitions and things like that. So we're factoring in cost of munitions expended into that total.
So how much of that has gone towards munitions? Does that include the munitions that have been spent to date?
Yeah, that reflects the munitions that have been spent to date and other operational costs.
Can you give us a breakdown of what those costs are?
We'll work to get you guys a product that has a detailed breakdown of those costs.
Yeah, my concern here is, Mr. Hegseth, you've testified repeatedly that you're going to be accountable for each and every American taxpayer dollar that you spend, that you're going to be accountable for the rationale. Here we are 60 days in to your war of choice in Iran, and you can't give us an answer on a breakdown of the basic breakdown of American taxpayer dollars that have been spent in your war of choice? That's a question for Mr. Hurst. Right now, as you sit here now, you cannot...
We're happy to give you a breakdown. We'll provide you a product after this hearing.
What?
Notice the strategic pivot here. Goodlander doesn't throw a hypothetical gotcha question. She enters their own $25 billion metric directly into the record. $25 billion burned through in just 60 days. On a war of choice in Iran, when she asks for the simplest breakdown, how much was allocated to weapons versus operational costs, Hurst offers the textbook bureaucratic deflection, "We'll work to get you guys a product." Think about the magnitude of that. The Department of Defense is blowing through tens of billions of dollars without being able to look lawmakers in the eye and explain where the cash went today. Secretary Hegseth attempts to pass the buck, entirely stating that's a question for Mr. Hurst, completely walking away from his own pledge of being personally accountable for every taxpayer dollar.
I would love for you to give us this breakdown now and explain to us, was this unbudgeted costs, or was this something the department planned for in advance, since you were appropriated $1 trillion last year?
The department deals with contingency operations all the time within its normal budget.
So this was not budgeted for. My point here is, and General Kane, you've testified to this. We all understand, for you to do your jobs, you need Congress to pass budgets. For us to do our jobs, we need you to give us the details and to be accountable to American taxpayers. And so I got to say, it's an extraordinary dereliction that as you sit here, you cannot account for billions of dollars that have already been spent.
You're
in this
briefed
war.
on munitions every week. You and your entire staff have every,
asking
just so the
you-
American public know, it's not
Mr.
as if you don't
Hegseth,
have munitions levels.
Mr.
You do
Hegseth.
from us every single week, so
Mr.
you know
Hegseth,
exactly the numbers you're talking
Mr. Hegseth,
about.
you have testified that American taxpayers need to know where their dollars are going.
This is how you hold the untouchable accountable. Goodlander labels this exactly what it appears to be, an extraordinary dereliction of duty. The officials try to drown her out with crosstalk, arguing they provide ammunition updates weekly, but Goodlander refuses to yield. Handing over stock inventory lists is completely different from providing financial transparency for a $25 billion spending spree. They want the $1.5 trillion payout, but they refuse to show the invoices for the $25 billion they just blew through. But Goodlander is far from finished. She is gearing up to link these overseas billions straight to the wallets of the voters. Watching at home.
Mr. Hegseth, can I ask you, do you know what the average cost of a gallon of gas was in this country on February 28th?
Well, it depends on where you live. If you live in California, it's $8.
$2.83. Do you know what the average cost of a gallon of gas is today?
Well, much higher in California.
$4.23. I gotta say, Mr. Hegseth, you said you've got a crack economic team that's looking at the impacts of this war on the American taxpayer, and you can't answer this basic question. That should shock the conscience of every American. General.
This exchange is absolutely brutal. Goodlander moves the spotlight away from classified military spending and directly to the gas pump. She poses a straightforward, reality-grounded question. What did gas cost before this conflict started? And what does it cost now? Hegseth's reaction is entirely dismissive. Rather than answering the question, he deflects with a snarky comment about California. Goodlander is forced to supply the data for him. It spiked from $2.83 to $4.23. When a defense secretary brags about employing a crack economic team, yet has no clue how much everyday Americans are bleeding at the pump because of his policies, the facade of the man of the people shatters completely. However, the ultimate strike has nothing to do with economics. It centers on the Constitution.
Okay, and I want to come back to something, a really important principle, and my time is limited. You testified to an important and bedrock principle of American law, that our service members follow lawful orders and lawful orders only. Is that right? Do you agree with the statement, quote, the military won't follow unlawful orders?
I do.
Mr. Hegseth, do you agree with that statement?
I do, but understand what you're insinuating at a partisan point.
I'm not. I'm actually quoting you directly, Mr. Hegseth, from April 12th, 2016. And I appreciate that on the record, you've clarified this important principle of American
Gentlelady's
law.
time's expired. Chair, I
The definitive receipt. Goodlander lays a spectacular snare. First, she establishes a foundational rule of the U.S. military with General Keane. Soldiers are bound to execute only lawful orders. General Keane concurs without a second thought. Then she pivots to Secretary Hegseth. Expecting a trap, Hegseth instantly puts his guard up. He agrees, but charges her with making a partisan point. And then comes the knockout punch. Goodlander is not pushing a partisan agenda. She is reciting Hegseth's literal own words, back to his face from April 12, 2016, when a public official becomes so aggressively defensive that they label their own statement as a political smear. It's clear the hearing is over. Hegseth was cornered by his own rhetoric, completely caught off guard by a representative who genuinely did her homework. This is exactly why the political elite loathe transparency. It is not about guarding troop movements or operational security. It is about dodging responsibility for flunked audits, unapproved billions, and the very genuine financial suffering experienced by the taxpayers. When Representative Goodlander informs Hegseth she is quoting him directly, she is asserting the rule of law over an executive branch that expects infinite funding with zero oversight. Accountability perishes in the dark corners of contingency operations and empty assurances of delivering a product after the fact. The government is presently demanding you cover a $25 billion invoice, all while dismissing the reality that your fuel costs just exploded. Leave a comment below. Should the Pentagon receive a $1.5 trillion allowance when they cannot even explain to Congress where $25 billion vanished in the last 60 days? And does Pete Hegseth's display right here, branding his own historical, quote, a political attack, instill faith in our military leadership? Let us call out those who prioritize political evasion over the United States Constitution.
Welcome back to the political epicenter. Donald Trump has officially kicked Attorney General Pam Bondi out the door, ending the career of one of his most loyal allies with a single chilling decree. Let's cut to the chase. The truth is unfolding right in the heart of the West Wing. Bondi was ousted because she failed to weaponize the Justice Department to destroy political rivals. And worse, her clumsy cover-up to seal the sensitive Jeffrey Epstein files ignited a storm of public outrage. Amidst the panic, Todd Blanche, an obedient personal defense attorney, was immediately propped up to replace her. Listen to the moment the system fractured on national television.
Coming on the air with breaking news, President Trump has apparently fired his Attorney General Pam Bondi, according to a senior administration official and a source familiar with the matter. This comes after NBC News learned that the president has grown frustrated with his Attorney General in recent days, according to multiple sources.
Just minutes after NBC dropped the hammer, Fox News, the administration's traditional safe haven, scrambled onto the airwaves for damage control. Watch how reporter Peter Ducey awkwardly delivers the whitewash script straight from the White House.
And the president said he was preparing some remarks. We think that it is going to be the official announcement about the Attorney General Bondi leaving the Justice Department. She will not be leaving the administration. They are going to find a different job for her. So President Trump thinks that she did a good job. President Trump still likes her, but at this time, he feels like Todd Blanche should be elevated in an interim role. So the plan, at least as of the last couple minutes, and a lot of things are changing, is to name Todd Blanche in an interim role as the country's top law enforcement officer running the Justice Department. We are hearing a lot of different things about why this might happen. We think President Trump will elaborate on that more. But when you talk to people here at the White House, it is very important to them just to reiterate that there's not bad blood right now with Bondi leaving.
The contrast between these two broadcasts is the absolute peak of media manipulation. One side calls this a firing born of extreme frustration. The other strokes public opinion with sweet words like no bad blood and still likes her. But ladies and gentlemen, no head of state strips the top law enforcement seat in America from a close confidant just for a personnel rotation. Throwing up a smokescreen that Bondi did a good job is a classic psychological tactic designed to save face while simultaneously locking the jaws of the former Attorney General, a woman holding countless lethal White House secrets. The brutal reality is, when a tool gets dull, it is mercilessly discarded. To understand why the president was so frustrated that he had to execute a purge, we have to look directly through the power lens of this administration. NBC News bravely pointed out the root cause of the fury.
First Trump term. And this, in many ways, comes down to a representation of the frustration that President Trump has, that his vision for how he could exact retribution against political rivals and those who had, in his perception, done him wrong at some past point to be brought to justice. That has not happened, even though this Department of Justice under Pam Bondi has attempted to do so in a number of areas where we've seen the failed attempts to prosecute James Comey or Letitia James.
This isn't a conspiracy theory. This is a report on national television. The sacred firewall separating the White House and the Justice Department has been leveled. Pam Bondi wasn't chosen to defend the Constitution. She was chosen to be an executioner, expected to turn the justice agency into a personal weapon. The blacklist was clear. James Comey, Letitia James Bondi took the orders and tried to cobble together cases reeking of personal vendettas. But the legal system still had guardrails. The inability to lock up the opposition based on baseless charges left the president's thirst for revenge unsatisfied. That was Bondi's death sentence. And the most chilling evidence of this was leaked. And the most chilling evidence of this illegal interference was leaked, as NBC News revealed.
And there was a message posted some months ago in which he seemed to and appeared to post what was meant to be a private message that started with the word Pam, and had a directive about actions that he wanted to see her take on when it came to potential indictments for people that he wanted to see happen in a faster way with more of an urgency to it.
A cold text message starting with Pam, followed by a colon, turning the law into a personal toy. The president forcing the attorney general to expedite the prosecution of rivals exposed a system rotting from its core, serving autocratic power entirely. If the failed revenge was the spark, the Jeffrey Epstein cover-up was the C4 explosive that incinerated Bondi's credibility. And surprisingly, it was Fox News that exposed this deception. Reporter David Spunt laid out the timeline.
Tampa this morning went straight to work. They will share those pictures soon, but no specific comment on the firing. So we'll see what comes from the president here shortly. Peter, stand by with us on the breaking news.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. And for now, let's go to Fox News Justice correspondent David Spunt. Hi, David. What have you heard?
Well, we knew that Pam Bondi, the former attorney general, was on thin ice for a long time with this administration, though she has a personal close relationship with President Trump. She's known him for years. She was the attorney general in the state of Florida. He's a resident of Florida. She was his attorney during his impeachment trial in the Senate during his first term. So President Trump and Pam Bondi have a good personal relationship. But we know administration officials were not happy with the way the Epstein files were handled. This is something that has really hurt the attorney general since she came into office in February of 2025. Just some history there. She comes into office February 2025, and then a few weeks later, in an interview with John Roberts, I believe it was during this hour on Fox News with John and Sanders, said the Epstein files were on her desk, or the files were on her desk when she was asked about the Epstein files. She later clarified and said that she meant the JFK files, the RFK files, the Martin Luther King files, as well as the Epstein files. But there were so many more questions just about the overall handling of the Justice Department dealing with the Epstein file.
Look at the psychological manipulation. It promised to bring light to the dark corners of the ultra-rich, creating a fake populist image. Bondi boldly declared the files were on her desk. But then she hastily backpedaled, equating this modern-day child sex abuse case with decades-old historical mysteries like JFK or MLK to dilute public outrage. Why did they back down from a case that could clean up the worst elite garbage? Are their names too powerful, hiding in the shadows? The horrifying truth was revealed.
Bondi. Over the summer, DOJ put out a release and they said that there would be nothing further warranted from the Epstein files. No charges would be filed. The case is essentially closed. And then Deputy Attorney General, now I guess we could call him Interim Attorney General Todd Blanche, met with Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein's former girlfriend and co-conspirator, convicted co-conspirator. So the story never fully went away. In fact, Bondi was supposed to testify before Congress in a deposition about Epstein on April 14th in just a couple of weeks. So she clearly will no longer have to do that.
Closing the file without any charges is a slap in the face to justice. And the most gruesome detail, Todd Blanche, the man replacing Bondi, is the exact person who met with Ghislaine Maxwell, the notorious co-conspirator. Instead of prosecuting, they were negotiating. Congress was furious and subpoenaed Bondi to testify on April 14th. Executing Bondi right now is a ploy to silence their riskiest witness, snuffing out a PR disaster right before the midterms. To truly see the cold-blooded nature of the political elite, look at the scene just 24 hours before the sentence was handed down.
In a back seat, and she was in the seat with him yesterday, going in the beast, as it's known, the presidential limousine, to the Supreme Court to listen to one of the key ideas of his time in office, which is birthright citizenship that he wants to challenge. Apparently, she was unable to save herself in those personal, direct moments.
Yeah, I mean, I was sitting there. I saw them, and everybody looked very chummy. It was her along with Secretary Letnick sitting with the president, very dialed in. Obviously, this birthright citizenship, a huge issue for the president, one of his first executive orders, a very big issue for him legally. For him to show up as the first sitting president telegraphed a lot of weight on this argument yesterday. And so they were sitting there together, clearly as his top law enforcement officer, as the attorney general. She was a part of that A-list bench that was there together. And they looked very chummy. At one point, there was actually some passing of notes. And you wouldn't have, from seeing them together in court yesterday, imagined that there was something that there was this close to being in the...
It's a scene more chilling than any mafia movie. Bondi rode in the armored vehicle, the Beast, the ultimate symbol of power. She was laughing, passing notes with the president in the A-list seats at the Supreme Court. She thought she was an untouchable courtier. She had no idea her political death warrant was already signed. And those social smiles were just an anesthetic before the guillotine dropped. Absolute loyalty is no longer a shield. It is a fatal weakness in the face of impulsive power. Bondi is out, clearing the path for Todd Blanche, ringing the death knell for the independence of the U.S. judiciary. Fox News didn't even try to hide his background.
Cases. So this was a situation in which the president really has resisted a lot of high turnover in his cabinet. Of course, some weeks ago, we did see the DHS secretary, former Secretary Kristi Noem, fired from her position before former senator, now the new DHS Secretary Markwayne Mullin, was put into place. And that had been the first actual cabinet secretary that was ousted and then replaced. So Pam Bondi will be the second in a very, very critical role here, as she has been involved in many of the very urgent matters and situations that the president has been dealing with, from everything on national security to, again, some of these more local and domestic investigations that he wanted her to pursue.
Todd Blanche is no constitutional warrior. He's the lawyer who untangles Trump's private scandals. Promoting a private attorney to head the nation's law enforcement agency is the pinnacle of conflict of interest. With Blanche's arrival, the DOJ officially becomes the president's private law firm, using taxpayer money to protect allies, cover up the Epstein files, and crush the opposition. The White House doesn't need a weak gatekeeper like Bondi anymore. They need a henchman who stops at nothing. Kristi Noem left. Now Bondi. The executive machine is spiraling into a continuous purge to find pieces willing to break every final limit. But the disaster doesn't stop at the DOJ over on Capitol Hill. Congressman Steve Cohen just exposed another brutal massacre happening inside the FBI under the hands of Director Kash Patel, 12 elite counterintelligence agents, the CI-12 group, who just wiped out with a snap of his fingers under the laughable excuse of ethical violations. The truth Cohen exposed will make your blood run cold. These 12 agents were the exact team that dared to investigate the hoarding of top-secret documents at Mar-a-Lago. This is a bloody vendetta. Anyone who touches the president's reverse scale will be destroyed. But what is the ultimate tragedy? While the top brass is busy gouging out the nation's intelligence, eyes for internal revenge, they are completely blind to an approaching war disaster. Blaring red alerts about a global economic collapse stemming from a potential Strait of Hormuz blockade are being thrown in the trash. The administration machine is using law enforcement agencies as a personal slaughterhouse to satisfy vendettas, callously gambling with the lives and economy of the people. The firing of Pam Bondi and the FBI purge is not the end. It is a damning indictment of a system where the truth is distorted, loyalty is drained, and the law is trampled to serve one individual. Don't forget to leave your thoughts below and subscribe so we can continue dissecting the ruthless events to come.